If you've ever watched horror films or even had a paranormal sense of curiosity, you might have heard about a game known as a Ouija board. Originally marketed as a family fun for all, this game eventually ended up sparking huge debates among the paranormal enthusiasts on what its intentions truly mean. While some have dismissed its capabilities and deemed it safe, others have said this game can open doors to things that we just have yet to fully understand. So let's basically start with what is a Ouija board. So a Ouija board is a game that's also known as a spirit board, dial board, or most commonly referred to as a talking board. Now the board is a flat surface that was made out of wood and later out of plastic in some cases that contains all of the letters of the alphabet, numbers, and the words yes, no, and goodbye. So the planchette piece, the French word for little plank, is a seemingly directional heart-shaped object that's guided by both the living and the non-living. For homemade Ouija boards, teacups were used and even overturned wine glasses. Now, for the dial plate talking boards, they had a pointer shaped like needle that was set to the center and it rotated to the letters that were designated. Now, these boards were round, unlike the typical rectangle shape that most commonly seen. Now, the letters were set up to be circular and around the board the same kind of similar design. Now, no matter what shape that was presented with this board, it completely made claims that it was being able to connect to the spirit world, to our world, by allowing the spirits to communicate with us more easily and clearly. Now, for the typical design, the users would gather by the board and all place their hands on the planchette or cup while being guided by spirits. And as questions are asked by the participants, the plank begins to softly guide its way to either spell out a word, glide over the yes or no sections, or even decide to end the session by resting over the word goodbye. This entire session is called a seance. Now, a seance is performed by people who seek out answers from the dead or ghostly spirits. Now, by using this board, people can connect to loved ones who have passed or even get questions answered about what's going on the other side. Now, although deemed as pure entertainment, there are many who feel this truly opens the door not only to the spirits we seek out, but for all entities to make their way into our world. So let's go back to the ancient history and culture behind Ouija boards. Now, Ouija boards didn't always have the name they have today, but the concept dates as far back as 1100 AD in China. Now, some say that this spirit writing dates back even as far as 551 AD, but the true time frame is still questionable among experts. Now, in China, Ouija was the official term used when referring to using this type of method to contact the spirits. During the Ming Dynasty, a suspended sieve was used over a tray to guide a stick to begin writing in ashes or even sand. Now, this method was said to summon not just any spirit, but the spirit of 𝗨𝗲𝗄, and I hope I said that right. Now, this can also be referred to as the Purple Maiden. Now, this practice began to flourish and grow with altars being built to honor it. However, it eventually was looked down upon with the Qing Dynasty, and I hope I said that right too, but Taoists still continued the long-honored practice. Now, this can even be found today in Taiwan, Malaysia, and even Hong Kong. So let's move on and talk about the spiritualist movement. Now, fascination with the paranormal goes back many centuries, but this seemingly harmless game as we know it today dates back more specifically to 1886. With the Civil War ending, the great amount of casualties, and so many left behind, mediums were in high demand as people they ached to talk to their loved ones that they lost or who never came home. So people sought comfort by seeking mediums, psychics, and anyone who could give them answers about life after death. One of the questions we hear is, are they safe? Are they in heaven? Do they have a message for me? All of these questions come forth to the psychics and mediums. Now, these were all pondered during these periods of immense grief. In fact, there were 3 mediums called the Fox sisters in New York, and they were rumored to have a direct connection to the other side. It was said they were using a homemade spirit board to make this connection, along with using their self-professing gifts. Now, these sisters were very well known during the spiritual movement, and they gave seances to hundreds of people that were seeking an afterlife connection. So although these sisters later confessed to being fraudulent and then recanted their confessions, the spirit boards continued to gain momentum as a tool to speak to anyone on the other side. Let's get down to the shady business behind the history of the spiritualist movement and Ouija boards. Now, in the wake of the spiritualist movement, two gentlemen seemed destined to meet on a new adventure when both came across the idea of making a spirit board into a marketable item. It was Charles Kennard, the child of a successful Delaware merchant. He moved to Maryland to market his secret fertilizer recipes, and he had a known reputation as being quite the shady businessman, unlike his father. It was there that he met a Prussian immigrant and coffin maker named 𝗚𝗍 Wright, who shared an adjacent office with him. So, also working as a profitable undertaker, Reich understood that there was a connection between the living and the non-living. And since his line of work actually dealt with both, he knew this to be true. So after coming across numerous newspaper articles covering the spirit boards and seances in Ohio, these two gentlemen both saw the signs. And by that, I mean the dollar signs, not the paranormal signs. So Wright put his hard work and coffin-making woodworking skills to use by creating and naming the Ouija board. Well, being his shady self and using the salesman charming skills he was used to, Charles takes off with the idea in 1890 and claims it for himself. Mr. Kennard even claimed that the Ouija board named itself from an Egyptian phrase meaning good luck. Well, the truth was that it actually came from two other words, both French and German. So the French word for yes, oui, and the German word ja for Ouija. Now, no matter where the name truly came from, he pitched the idea to anyone who would listen with the hopes of claiming the Ouija board surely and solely as his own. So unfortunately for him, no one was paying attention because the idea itself was not new at all. And in fact, his reputation preceded him. But at long last, 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗿 came to the rescue and approved the patent, claiming he was inspired to push the idea due to his sister having skills as a medium herself. So enter into the scene Mrs. Peters. Helen Peters was known as a medium and even rumored to have a role in naming it before Kennard's prior claims. On October 30th, 1890, the day before Halloween, the Kennard Novelty Company is established and the patent is claimed by Charles Kennard and William Maupin. So what better day to launch than on Halloween? Now, needing to make another quick buck since the fertilizer business wasn't paying enough, the rights and the interests were sold off, leaving out 𝗚𝗍 Wright completely. Well, karma eventually stepped in and Kennard was dismissed from his own company, even with the name. Moving on to the demand, rise, and fall. Now, the Kennard Company did so well selling the new Ouija boards that eventually it changed its name to the Ouija Novelty Company. Now, business was good with William 𝗨𝗏 in charge, and it seemed to everyone that their home was encouraged to participate in this family fun seance for all. Well, William 𝗨𝗏 even became dubbed the father of the Ouija, since he was credited for its rising popularity, even though he himself dismissed it having any powers at all. Soon enough, the market erupted, and for $1.50, you too could be the proud owner of your very own Ouija the talking board in your own home. Newspapers exploded with advertisements, and Friday evenings became family fun seance night for many, with family and friends gathering in the other living rooms. So one of the most popular places to find these novelty items was in popular catalogs. I mean, you could scroll through a catalog and find a Ouija board for everybody. Well, Kennard was furious and, being greedy as well as bitter, attempted to have the last laugh as he started a rival company producing yet another version of the Ouija board called the Volo Talking Board. Now, this created a vigorous lawsuit that put Kennard out of business yet again. Yet another company stepped in once more, wanting to capitalize on the Ouija board, making their own 𝗨𝘀𝗍𝗏. They even went as far as printing their logo on the back of the Ouija boards already on the market. Way to go on not looking suspicious at all. Now, who had the last laugh? Well, no one. The movement began to play itself out like a social media trend would today, and all the companies began to fizzle out with it. Now, sadly, 𝗚𝗲𝗍𝗿 met his own demise after a fall from the top of the roof of his very own factory, and that was rumored that the Ouija board advised him to build. Now, the original Ouija board company even caught fire, destroying everything with it. You'd think they would have seen it coming, right? Now, was this some sort of curse, or maybe the spirits intervened? Well, no matter how you view it, it sure didn't seem like Ouija boards were meant to be on the mass market, even though they were eventually marketed as games or, well, even novelty items. Now, they can be found marketed the same way in stores. You can get them on Amazon or practically anywhere you can find the paranormal interest. Let's talk about the Ouija board's influence and perception. As most would agree, spirits are people who have passed away, and as their essence, energy, or presence remains, it's natural for anyone who's grieving to want to talk to them or perhaps even say goodbye for their own personal closure. And now a seance is one way to do this, and a Ouija board gives even more clarification with clear words that all users can see, instead of just being communicated by a medium. Now, also with hiring a medium, this meant putting a lot of trust in someone to hear or relay or possibly even tell someone your very personal information. I mean, after all, these ghosts and spirits know us pretty well. Now, for some people, even affording a medium is out of the budget, while a cost-effective board game seemed pretty harmless. After all, it was marketed as fun for family and friends, and watching the little pointer jump to spell out answers, well, most figured out that was a pretty good time. Now, even the Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi claims its use was helpful to recover 𝗨𝗲𝗍𝗿 from the Red Brigades. I mean, this is going down in history right here. Now, others who spoke very highly of the game were writers such as 𝗨𝗀𝗲𝗿 and poet James Merrill. Now, they both claimed that using the talking board gave them great inspiration for their writings and their work. Now, Pearl even states that a spirit by the name of Patience Worth communicated with them through this very method, well, for 20 years. Now, beyond writing novels and poetry, the age of television began to emerge. Popular television shows like I Love Lucy showed it as something for fun, which brought laughs into almost every home. Now, watching Lucy, wouldn't you want to promote anything dark or terrifying? No, you wouldn't. So why wouldn't viewers go out and go get one for themselves? Now, other popular shows that included spirit boards, such as jovial parts, were The Waltons and Lost in Space. So it seemed like even our television heroes had these in their own homes as well. Now, with all of the television shows, newspapers, and people recommending this game to their neighbors in line at the grocery store, Ouija boards only grew in popularity. And as a matter of fact, they even outsold Monopoly games at one point. Now, no one was talking about what would happen in their homes after using it, and no one certainly ever referred to it as something evil. Now, no one ever experienced a haunting landing on Park Avenue with a little shoe piece going by. So people just thought this was a game. And no one had issues back then. However, this definitely sparked a lot of fear and controversy because that view began to change. Now, Ouija boards have stirred up controversy from the very beginning, although it wasn't talked about like it was today. Now, it was marketed as a game for fun, but after strange occurrences began happening in homes and buildings after the seances, people began to wonder if they should even be playing at all. Now, even skeptics began to agree that maybe there was something on the other side that shouldn't be played with to begin with. Now, initially, communing with the dead wasn't even seen as taboo. It was something we've all done since the beginning of time, practically. Now, once the Ouija board made its way into our everyday culture, not everyone was a huge fan or even agreed to it being in their home. In fact, some religious groups dismissed it almost immediately and associated it with very dark practices. So let's talk about Ouija boards in horror films. For my horror film fans, you're gonna love it. Now, some people have paranormal experiences that made them uncomfortable after their spirit sessions with the board. Now, the world of film and cinema decided to use these fears as inspiration to create some of their horror films. In fact, In 1944, The Uninvited features a brother and sister who purchase a house with a terrible past, and they use a seance to uncover the dark spirits who reside there. Don't know if you've seen it, but if you like horror films, it's definitely worth a watch. Now, this fear-inducing phenomenon continued with the movie that's still listed by many as one of the scariest of all time, The Exorcist. In 1973, there was a lot to be feared, with cults being featured and serial killers who focused on the ritualistic as well as sadistic murders. Now, satanic cults were making people lock their doors for the first time and get home early before the sun set. So, no surprise when The Exorcist hit the theaters, these fears were confirmed when the main character became possessed after her use of a Ouija board. Now, that movie scares the daylight out of me. I don't watch that alone or often or at all. Now, this game became more of a demonic tool to viewers. Now, more films, they really began to run with it. Now, another popular film series in the 80s was known as The Witch Board. Now, this featured a similar theme as the others, with two people suddenly becoming haunted by dark entities after their use of the Ouija board. Then churning quickly into the 90s, the trend continued with Sorority House Massacre, where young sorority girls are innocently playing with the Ouija board only to open a door that leads to horror. Go figure. In 2007, enter What Lies Beneath, which uses the board to contact a murderer. Now, that couldn't possibly go south, right? Now, one of the more popular horror films that tackles Ouija boards is the Paranormal Activity. Everyone knows that movie. After use of the board with only one night, many nights of dark terror ensued that eventually leads to an entire series. I didn't watch the series, I just watched the first one. But none of that for me either. Let's talk about murder and mayhem and Ouija boards. So beyond cinematic experiences, having people question their use being directed at having a fun time, others began to claim the Ouija board opened them to dark experiences. Some even claimed to have been influenced by this game to commit murder. For example, Joshua Tucker was convicted of murder after claims by his mother were made that he was possessed by the devil when using the Ouija board in his room late one night. Now, in another instance, the Ouija board was not blamed for causing the murder, but for actually solving the murder itself. In London, jurors had contacted the murder victim himself, who told them that it in fact was a completely different person altogether who murdered him. The newly named person was convicted, tried, and sentenced to life. I mean, who would have thought that a seance could have saved somebody from going to jail? Now, 𝗨𝗲𝗍 was only 15 years old when she shot her father Ernest directly in the back. Although she initially claimed it to be an accident, she later changed her story to include her mother and a Ouija board session. She suddenly claimed to the spirit world told her in a session to end her father's life so that she could marry a man that would make her happier. And I'm not really sure what that means, but a jury convicted her and a judgment was later reversed. But not because of that. Now, you can't talk about Ouija boards without talking about religion, because there are a lot of religious objections out there. Anything dealing with the afterlife can always be seen as controversial, especially among those with deep-rooted religious beliefs that dispel these types of practices. Now, this can seem confusing since most religious texts cover quite a few prophets and such speaking to people on the other side. So although talking to the dead has been a long covered practice, many religions feel it can be a doorway that we shouldn't be opening at all. Now, as a matter of fact, there are quite a few Christian denominations that dismiss any use of Ouija boards altogether. And why, you may ask? Some Christians state that all answers should come from God and that asking any supposed spirits are forbidden. Now, this is due to the fact that many Christians feel that these are not our loved ones at all, but instead are demons trying to use trickery to get us to do their bidding. Now, one of their strongest reference points is Deuteronomy 18:10-12 from the Christian Bible that highlights the use of witchcraft and spells being detestable in the eyes of the Lord. So this is not seen as something good, especially according to the Christian Bible. Now, those in the Catholic religion have similar quarrels with the Ouija board and its use as well. So seeking divination from anywhere other than God, the saints, or prophets is also seen as demonic. Now, Catholics have never, nor would they ever approve of anything that resembles witchcraft or communing with demons in any other world for answers to any questions at all. That's the same Bible reference was also used there as well. Now, you have other religions weighing in, such as the Lutheran religion and other religious skeptic parties. They pretty much kind of align with the same belief that Ouija boards are dangerous. Now, many of them have gone to great lengths to warn against them and have encouraged prior users to burn them for their own safety. Now, whether or not this can remedy any harm or close any doors, many have delved into this practice and have followed suit to keep their loved ones safe. Next, you have to ask yourself, does it even work? With such alternating rising and falling popularity, the Ouija board is always striking up heated debate with even its very name mentioned. With entire religions banning its usage and many families heeding extreme caution to even allow it through the front door, people often find themselves questioning its validity. Is this simply an entertaining game? Can this be a tool to open dangerous gateways? Or is this harmless communication with loved ones from the past? Well, to begin with, Ouija boards were marketed as mystical and oracles to give answers to questions that only those on the other side could deliver. Well, as time went on, they were sold as purely entertainment and great for parties. And as we mentioned before, this was due largely to the fact that even 𝗚𝗵𝗿 was not initially a believer beyond it being a fun party game to have guests over for. Now, for some users, they absolutely swore by its results, some going so far as to claiming the spirits gave them answers to things that no one else could possibly have prior knowledge on, even with those present who were participating. Now let's get into the science. Anytime we come across something that's fascinating and we can't help but wonder, well, what does science say about that? Now, fact-finding and truth-seeking are always natural when anyone experiences something that seems too good to be true or beyond our understanding. So if you've wondered the same thing, you certainly aren't alone. Many have examined the science behind the Ouija board to uncover if or how the mystic object even begins to work. In the 1800s, this phenomenon was so intriguing that an English philosopher named Michael Faraday took a great interest in unraveling the mystery behind the game. Michael Faraday is credited to this day with his discoveries on the electromagnetic induction, electrolysis, and more. His theory he presented for the Ouija board usage was due to the ideomotor response. Now, this essentially states that the psychological response causes a person to move things without using conscious thinking. Now, this can be compared to like a reflex response when using the planchette to find answers and consistent with their heart desires to know things that were previously veiled. This entire concept was originally written by William Benjamin Carpenter, who wrote a scientific paper on the entire matter in 1852 reflecting these very ideals. In fact, his friend James Braid was the founder of our modern type of hypnotism as it's known today. Now, Braid inspired him to delve deeper and uncover that due to the deep desire and answers for concentration on the subject using the Ouija board. Now, the person or the persons using the board will move the pointer toward desired answers with using very little conscious thought. Their results concluded that the planchette moving on its own was simply an illusion due to the users of the seance being in a dissociative state and unconsciously aware of their own hand movements. Now, Faraday, a mentalist known as the Amazing Kreskin, and illusionist Darren Brown, even used a plain piece of paper with yes or no answers written on it to test this theory as well. A handheld pendulum was used in place of a planchette, but gave similar results that seemed to lean towards this theory holding much validity, but much disappointment to many mystics who still dispelled these tests. So many mediums and others dispute these results due to their own experiences. Now, many scholars went as far as to say the Ouija board was simply a con to play on those who are either grieving or who are susceptible to primitive beliefs. Now, another great mind by the name of Chris French had his own experience with testing a Ouija board he made himself at home with friends. So, Chris, being a professor emeritus of psychology at the Goldsmith University of London, had a curious nature to begin with, but he also wanted to test the theories that had been presented long before his time. Now, he concluded it was great fun, but didn't feel that after using the Ouija board that he had any communication with any spirits at all. So let's sum it up. In the 1800s, the emergence of the Ouija board came out and stirred up plenty of controversy as the spiritual movement was in full swing. Even with the history clouded in backstabbing, thievery, and sadly death as well, this spirit board had many issues surrounding it that gave cause for much concern for all involved. Now, originally, spirit boards were a deeper way to connect to loved ones for many centuries, and then it simply became known as a game for profit. Now, many users claim to be inspired by Ouija boards, even giving them credit for their acclaimed work. Others felt less inspired to do great things, but instead commit atrocious acts, claiming that the board gave them dastardly instructions. Some even professed it opened up spiritual portals that couldn't be closed and began to cause havoc in their lives, while yet others felt it truly gave them answers or the closure that they needed during the grieving process. Now, scientists had their own theories when it came to the Ouija board. Now, most felt that its movement could be explained using the psychology, explaining the subconscious mind actually moves the pointer itself without us even knowing it. And others felt that this was simply a con game meant as a tool to prey upon those who were desperate for answers. For many religions, it was completely dismissed as satanic or a tool for the occult. So here's our conclusion. Ouija boards can be seen with so many different perceptions depending on your background and possibly even your faith. For me personally, I used one for fun as a teenager only once and it didn't see any harm whatsoever. But however, I've had many friends who have sworn by its results and would never touch one again. I personally don't condone them, but any object can be used for good or bad. A pencil can be an incredible tool to write a best-selling novel or could be used for a weapon to harm an enemy. It's all in the intent and the user. So when we find ourselves seeking to open doors, we can't always be sure on who or what we let in. So if I had to make a recommendation, I'd recommend leaving it alone. Now, with such a dark and shaded history, I feel like the Ouija board can stay on the shelf and far from my home if I ever say so. For others, I say to heed my warning. Now, would you Ouija or would you not? I'd say the doors here will stay closed, locked, and staged as far as I'm concerned. So this is 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗏 with Ghost Hunting Beauties. We hope you've liked our program today. Just don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends.